Hello and welcome to Beebe Book Buzz. I'm Karen Stern and we are here today with two members from the library. One new one. We have Annie Hockheiser here from the children's room. We're blessed to have had two in a row, so it'll make life very exciting for us. And Beth Radcliffe, who is not new. An old standard.
Old hand.
Yeah. So as always, we're here to talk to you about the books we've been reading recently that we are excited about, and in hopes that you can find your next great read. I'm going to start today. We have all fiction, right? Everybody's doing fiction today, but of a variety of types. This book is called Intimacies by Katie Kitamura, and I will admit that I lay awake in bed last night trying to figure out how to talk about this book because I loved it. It wasn't that I didn't love it. It's just a hard book to explain. And it was really a surprising and exciting book to me, and I didn't want it to end. It was that kind of book, which doesn't I have a lot of books and that doesn't happen often. So so anyway, I'm going to do my best to explain it without giving too much away. I'm going to start by giving you the kind of the main character and a little bit about the arc of the story, just as a kind of grand overview, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I liked. It's even hard to talk about the character because she's unnamed through the whole book, right? She is an unnamed first-person narrator. Everything is seen through her eyes. And so she's both unnamed, and I would also say she is unmoored. Like there's a sense of uncertainty through this whole book, and because of her personality in particular, she seems to not really know what to do with herself or what she wants to be or do.
Relatable.
She's just, sorry?
Yeah. Relatable.
Absolutely relatable. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, and the way the author manages to make you connect with her is you're getting her thoughts, right? Anyway, I'll get into that later. So she's just come to The Hague after leaving New York City, where her father has just died. She comes from an international family who lived all over the world. It's just three of them. Her mother's Japanese, her father's American, and they've had a life that has taken them all over the world. So she is multilingual, and therefore she has just accepted a job at The Hague as an interpreter at what is modeled on the International Criminal Court. She doesn't call it that, but it is definitely that. And if you don't know, the International Criminal Court is basically, it's a war crimes court for countries all over the world. So you can imagine there's a huge army of interpreters there, and this is what her job is going to be. So here's this uncertain person in a new place, having just had a loss in her family, and that's how we begin the book. And I will say, for all the uncertainty that I'm about to talk about in this book, there is a clear arc to her progression. She does learn things. She becomes less uncertain. She makes choices, and there is an ending, which I'll talk about a little bit later. That one of the other things that lends itself to the uncertain, feeling of, I would say, even unease in this book. It was almost like at times I felt it was like a thriller. Like you kept thinking something bad's about to happen. What's going on here? Why? And then I was like, but we're just reading about her like going to her friend's house. Why? I couldn't figure out why. And I think there are several reasons why. The setting is one of them. The Hague is this place that is very like full of transitory people. People are coming, they come and they do government work, or they're translators at the court or whatever, and they don't stay very long. So everybody's kind of slightly unsettled there. She paints it in it's a little bit gray, and I think that's probably true of it. It sits on the North Sea. It's kind of gray and a little bit noirish in feel. So, and then there's some danger that happens in the story.
Well, it's a criminal court, right? So
it's a criminal court, and that's a huge so there's a lot of horrors there. Yeah. And then also there's a crime that happens in the book in one of the neighborhoods that's kind of she gets a little fixated on, and it's so there's a little bit of actual danger, lurking in the book as well. So there's that. And then the other thing I think that I realized much later that lends itself to this tone of unease and foreboding and uncertainty is the actual writing style. And I think that this is where Kitamura is just amazing. She writes these sentences, and I can do nothing but try to explain them to you a little bit here without going into too much detail. So you're getting this intensely first-person narration, right? But she'll start a sentence, and she starts it here at this point with this assumption or this opinion or this observation. And then by the end of the sentence, or maybe the end of the paragraph, or maybe the end of the whole scene, depending, and this is a short book, there's not big scenes, you're in a completely different place. Like her mind has gone from this point of I believe this, and I think this, and I'm sure of this, to this point, after having kind of shifted and reassessed, and that is how this book, and it's like what happens in your mind, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's how your mind moves.
Yeah, yeah.
And she does it so well. And you might think, oh God, that's going to take up like tons of space on the page, and this is going to be going on, rambling on forever like my brain does. But that's the beauty of it, is that she manages to come up with sentences that are really tight, really short.
There's a real art to that, to being able to
Yeah.
take that just string of like constant words and
make
to be
you
able
feel
to
it.
Yeah.
Really feel it. It's almost like poetry.
Well,
like,
that's what I was gonna say. It sounds very much
has
like
the feeling
poetry.
of
Yes.
poetry in a way. And there's also, and at times it can be, it's internal, but what she's describing can feel really cinematic. So you know, you're looking at a museum, you know, they're often at parties and bars and stuff because everybody's always socializing, and you get this kind of sweep that you can almost imagine them making a movie out of. You can see the scene, and
So the setting as a
so the setting
really well explained.
So she just managed to do this in this really pretty slim book. I mean, I was
Yeah.
done in a heartbeat, and I was like, how did that even happen? So, and all the while, you know, she has there's a love interest. She has a boyfriend. And there's tensions there. She has a couple of friends that you meet, and there's different stories there. And then, of course, there's the court. As you mentioned before, Beth, there's like, you think about and we haven't even got to the name of the title, which is Intimacies yet, but you think about the intimacies that are between an interpreter and a person who is, for instance, a war criminal, or someone who's being accused of war crimes, or a victim of war crimes. And what that person, the interpreter, has to do to filter, to act as the sort of invisible filter for the language that's coming through them and out the other side. That kind of, and the manipulations that can happen there, and so there's really, and she does interpret for a very sensitive case of some horrific things that have happened to the general in this, or by the general in this story. So there we get a sort of sense of, it's not a book for people who want a lot of like point A to point B with all the facts in between plot line, right? It's not even, you're not going to get what she looks like, or what she had for lunch, or what are, you know, the details of all of her conversations. But as I said before, there is an arc to the story. She does grow and change and sort of find a way to step into her life in a way that you have been waiting for with all this unease and tension, right? And I will say the author nails the ending. It's also a book for people who obviously like the international setting and the culture and the politics. It has a relationship story, but most of all, I would say it is perfect for people who just are like observers of the intricacies of human nature and the way that people's brains work and the way that people interact in any given moment.
that also, observational aspect is really interesting with
very,
the
very
central sort of conflict.
And it's innovative writing. Like I said, it surprised me, which I love. I always like a book that surprises me. And she's a master of all of those things. So yeah, it's really about the intimacies. That's why it got the title that it did. Those moments between people when, whether they know each other well or they're people who have just met on the street, how we interact in a moment-to-moment basis, and the way those moments add up to shape our lives. That's I say what this is about.
I could see where there would be similarities with books that have to do with autistic people Like,
It's interesting that you say that. We talked about this in book group last
Oh.
night, and some people were saying, I don't know, if this was a different character, you might wonder, was she on the spectrum in some way? Yeah, yes. It's all there. There's a lot in this book, and as I said, for a slim novel.
Yeah, I keep noticing the size of it there.
A ton of stuff going on. So I would definitely highly recommend.
Have you read other of her books?
She wrote another book called, I think the other one that people know is called A Separation, which I think they made a movie out of, which is kind of the story of a marriage. Also, the character is an interpreter in this. She definitely has a fascination with the way that language connects and shifts and changes and stuff, and what interpreting means for that is a big theme.
It's always kind of interesting too to see writers in particular write about language.
Yes. And she says that herself.
Yeah.
If you watch her interviews, it's absolutely right. She's fascinated by what it means to, as an author. You are also an interpreter.
Right.
You, maybe it's, yes, you are.
Yeah. It's in a different way, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All artists, really.
Yes.
Anyway, so now we're going to move on to Annie.
Yes, I have another similarly sized book. This is We're Not From Here by Jeff Rodkey, who is a children's writer. He actually typically writes comedy, so I was pretty interested in this one.
Comedy for children?
Comedy for children,
okay.
yes.
Cool.
The Tapper Twins is one of his most well-known ones, which we have on a lot of our summer reading lists. This was really excellent. So this is what we would call, in the biz, a middle grade read, which means it's sort of written with roughly the ages 8 through 12 in mind.
Okay.
I will say, though, as an adult, this really sucked me in, though.
Right.
And I'm not just saying that because I'm a children's librarian. So this story begins years in the future, and it actually begins on Mars, after Earth has been destroyed by humans.
Right.
While we're on Mars, we are running out of clothing, we are running out of water, out of food, and out of oxygen.
Wow.
There's not a whole lot of options. The humans who are there, there's only about 2,000 of them left. And they're sort of sending feelers out. Is there another planet? Where can we go? Earth is not an option anymore.
So the food and water, everything they have, did they bring that from Earth?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So
Okay.
they're sort of in this station on Mars to just keep them alive until they can find their next move.
Right.
They ultimately end up hearing from a planet called Chum, which has 3 different species on it, 4 different species. There's the Zuri, they sort of look like these large mosquito-like creatures. There's the Nug, which are these like sort of thick worm-type creatures. And I promise if you're getting a little bit turned off, this is way too weird, too many aliens, too much sci-fi. I really don't consider myself to be a sci-fi person, so bear with me here.
I'm with you.
So we have a lot of different creatures, and when they show up on the screen, these humans, it's like, oh my, ugh, it's a little disturbing to see.
Who's saying that? The aliens or the humans?
The humans are,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
I mean probably vice versa, honestly. I'm sure we would look very weird to a giant mosquito. They basically agree, we've got a couple refugees on this planet. We're happy to take you. It's going to take them about 20 years to cross, into a new galaxy. Fortunately, since we are in the future, we have these biosuspension pods, which put you to sleep. They don't age you. Boom, off they go. We finally have an answer. Our protagonist, Lan, wakes up as they are orbiting Chum. This is 20 years later. Again, no one's aged. They cannot land because the Zuri have changed their mind after finding out that humans have such a violent history.
Oh.
And they decide, you are too violent, you cannot come here. So that's where we are as we begin this story.
Okay.
This was a real page turner. So my master's degree is in writing for children and for young adults, and the biggest thing, especially for kids, because they're a little, with an adult we might say, oh, let's give it a chance. With kids, if I don't like it, I'm done. I just
Right.
put it down,
Right.
which is part of what makes them such great readers.
Right.
So you really need to be careful when you write to constantly be pulling your audience in and making them want to turn that page. I cannot think of another book that has done that for me in the same way that this did. This was one of the hardest books to put down, because at the end of every chapter it was like a new issue came up. There was a new twist. There was a new reveal. And I was really interested. I did this as a book club book for middle school book club at the library. And I was quite curious because the concept, it's really quite dark. And I was curious how the kids would sort of interpret this.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised. They had a lot to say about this book. There's a lot going on, in addition to being, quite fast-paced, really high stakes, of course. We have sort of this dystopian vibe. There's this whole political aspect to the planet that we're on. How does their government work? Who is it serving? Who is it not serving? We have this whole concept where, immigration and refugees, which is what
Right.
the humans are in this
Right.
case. They also explore what's the function of the arts in the human world. We're also talking about emotions and, them being good versus bad, and
Yeah.
what sorts of actions do they cause. So this, similarly to yours, there's really a lot that's packed into not that
Sounds
many
like it.
pages.
Yeah.
And one of the most exciting things about walking into book club was the kids are hanging out, we've got our snacks, and we haven't started yet. Everyone is talking about different parts of this book,
Wow,
just
you know it's gonna be
nonstop.
good. That's
So great.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I wanted to bring this one specifically is, with the holidays coming up, if you're looking for something
Yep.
for a reader, even a reluctant reader, this is a really great one that will just absolutely suck you in. And I wanted to mention as well, you mentioned, not knowing too much about the narrator. This book also does that, but in a very different way. Lan is our narrator throughout, and one of our questions we talked about in book club was, did you notice Lan's gender is never mentioned?
Right.
It's never revealed at any point, and I actually found the readers were quite split on how they imagined Lan,
Right.
which I like as well, because it makes it a great book for anyone. Anyone can see themselves
Right.
as
You don't have to think
Lan
of this
throughout
Yeah.
this.
a gendered book in any way.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And it's sort of nice to see as well for, a sci-fi story, which I think historically they've been a little
Yeah.
bit male-dominated.
Right.
So this is great. It's just a nice window. Anyone can picture themselves in this
Yeah.
type of a
Yeah.
situation.
Great.
Meeting
and
with
would you
giant
say
mosquitoes. And
Yes, giant mosquito. I know,
Don't
that's
picture
the funny
giant
part.
mosquitoes too much. Yeah.
I know, that's the funny part, is the giant mosquitoes go, well, humans are a little too violent, and thinking about how we react to mosquitoes,
Maybe.
I get it.
Would you? Is it funny too? Because you mentioned.
Yeah, there is
It
some
is-
humor in it.
But it's not
and-
like a comedy book, but it is.
Yeah,
it's
I
got
wouldn't
you.
say it is a comedy. It definitely has elements of comedy,
Yeah.
and it also explores the impact of comedy too,
Okay.
which I really enjoyed,
Yeah,
and was
yeah.
definitely a pull for me as someone who, I don't really consider myself to be a sci-fi reader. But I would consider myself to be someone that reads comedy.
Right.
So it definitely sort of had those pulls, and like, what is it about comedy that helps us and that brings us together is another thing that's talked about in here.
Right.
But yeah, so definitely great if you are interested in that. Of course, if you like sci-fi, this is a great read.
Right.
But I would really say anybody that wants a book that's just sort of going to suck you into
And pull you
another
right
world,
along,
and
yeah.
with some really interesting conflicts going on.
And it sounds
fun.
like it might be a book for a kid who isn't sure if they would like sci-fi. It's an easy way in.
Absolutely, yeah. This was actually worth mentioning. This was selected last year. It was on the list for the Massachusetts Children's Book Awards,
Oh, okay.
which, if you're not familiar with those, it's a group of kids. They are all in grades 4 through 6.
Mm-hmm.
They read the books, they select all of them, and that's who the books are aimed at as
Okay.
well. So I
that's
always
good
think,
to know.
if kids are reading it and they're going, that's a great book.
Yeah.
They really have incredible taste. It's always a fabulous list every
Yeah,
year,
no,
but
I
this
think-
was definitely a highlight.
I know who I'm buying that for the
yeah.
holidays.
Yeah.
For sure. Yep.
All of my extended family, I think they're either too young or too old.
Well, maybe not too old.
But too old, it's true. You can, right? mean,
I
you
was
loved
going
it.
to say, as an adult, I really enjoyed
right,
it.
I'm drawn to
Yeah.
reading it, but I'm just thinking for the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe.
Maybe. All right.
Okay.
Is yours
so
a good holiday read, Beth, or is
good
maybe
holiday
not so
read?
much?
I don't know. It's a holiday read. It is Mercury Pictures Presents by Anthony Mara. And it does have comedy. In fact, I'm going to read you a few lines. Prince Michael Romanov was neither Romanov nor royal. He was Harry Gurkson, of the Brooklyn Gurksons. And before becoming a prince, he pressed pants for a living. It's not hard to love a town where a pants presser could rise to the rank of deposed royalty.
No. Say that 5 times fast.
Yeah.
I was having trouble with
Pants
those.
presser.
Pants presser. A lot of alliteration.
Yeah.
So that paragraph really is a window into what this book is like. It's exemplifies the tone. It's very tongue-in-cheek, an expose of Hollywood in the late 30s and the 40s. When Anthony Mora wrote it, he was thinking in his mind of His Girl Friday.
Yep.
Do you know that?
I don't.
Classic movie.
It's a classic movie with Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell, and it's this very witty repartee. They're just back and forth with their comments at each other. And so this book is like that. It's not quite so short as theirs, right? It's longer sentences. But it's really witty and funny. You were going to...
I was just going to say, and this is fiction. You said
It
it's
is
a
fiction,
takedown,
yes.
but it is
Yes,
definitely fiction.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
He is skewering that particular world of Hollywood, but also of our country, of politics. He includes a lot of paradoxes and things that we go through that are really bizarre. Not bizarre, but...
You mean we go through as a country,
Yeah.
as a society?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't think he's limiting it to Americans. I think this is
Right.
all people
Humanity.
do. Humanity, yeah. So the plot revolves around a scrappy film studio that produces B movies. And they are staffed by a motley crew of emigres and political exiles.
Oh, interesting.
In financial straits, they decide to do propaganda for our government for World War II, because that's when it's taking place. It mainly follows Artie and Maria. Artie is the studio's middle-aged exec, the producer. He's an immigrant from Silesia. He came at the turn of the century.
Right.
Maria, his second in command, is from Italy. She's escaping Italy's Mussolini, or Mussolini's Italy, I guess. And she's in her 30s. But there are a whole cast and crew of characters. A whole cast, yeah. Some are minor, although he really illustrates them well. A page or two, and you've got a really nice little picture of somebody.
When you've got a lot of characters to juggle too, that can be really hard, and it's hard to do it in a way that's eloquent and doesn't feel like it's, and Karen and Beth and Annie and
I think he does a really good job with that. They're very distinct people, and they all have their arcs and their triumphs and their losses. It's really, I like the characters. What can I say?
Yeah.
Let's see, the action takes place mainly in Hollywood, but there are forays into Italy, where Maria's father is a political prisoner. Well, I'll tell you that later. The author invokes so much in his descriptions. There's one place where he's describing an Italian piazza, and he talks about the pigeons scuttling around and the signorine in their tall heels tottering over people. And then there's a man who's trundling about getting the horse manure. It's all these senses he involves too. He fills the book with both historical and fictional characters and occurrences. Like there's Bela Lugosi, who was a horror. Okay, you know. Okay.
I know Bela Lugosi.
He also includes that the U.S. government built replicas of German villages so that they could practice the bombing of them. And that is true. We did do that.
Wow.
So those two things are also examples of how Mara does these parallels and overlaps and mirroring, because, like, for example, Bela Lugosi, an actor. In the book, he's Bela Lugosi. He is also pretending to be a Bela Lugosi impersonator,
Wow.
which I think he did in real life too.
Oh, okay.
Mara covers a lot of ground in this book, and my book is like
Yeah.
yours combined and longer,
Yeah.
but there's a lot. And I think as opposed to yours, it's actually hard to read it like straight through. He put so much in there that it's better to read it in small little chunks. And it's not heavy, a lot of stuff. It's more those parallels and the information and the ideas. So
Paradoxes. And
yeah,
all of it,
exactly,
all kind of-
exactly. So
right.
you stop and think about them.
The juxtaposition of the concepts is really interesting to me. You know, you have the backdrop of World War II, and then you also have this Hollywood studio making B movies, which is very humorous to me. And
Yes.
that's,
Well, and they
Well,
talk
B-movies is
about,
propaganda, right?
well,
Yes,
they were
yeah.
making B movies, which helps them with their propaganda.
Oh, okay, got it, right.
And they talk about how the government wants them to do real, make the scenes real, but you can't make the scenes real. It has to be artifice.
Right.
So there's all those layers too.
Right.
It's just fascinating.
yeah.
It's really
Sounds like
cool.
fun.
Yeah. I had a book group discussion about this book.
Yeah.
And there was mixed feelings about it. I obviously really liked it. Some people felt there were too many characters. But like for me, like I said, it was fine. The other thing is some people felt like they weren't invested emotionally in these characters. And I can see
Sometimes
where
when you have
that's
too many, it's hard
right.
to get
Sure.
into.
Exactly, and I can see that. But for me, the characters as he had developed them, and the creativity he used, and the language, and the ideas, and those paradoxes just carried me away with it.
Yeah.
I just found it
Right.
really fun.
Yeah.
I was going to say, too, I mean, sometimes for me, I don't need to be emotionally invested, but if I'm interested in the journey, it's
Yeah.
enough. You know, I mean, the age-old example of this, and a controversial one at that, is Holden Caulfield in, you know, Catcher in the Rye.
Right.
Oh,
yes.
right. Right.
You know, you don't necessarily have to like him, but do you want to follow him on this
Yeah,
adventure?
well, I guess that's like your character.
It's totally like my character, and we had a book group discussion about it as well. And a lot of people, I would say the group was maybe a little more pro, but pretty much 50-50. It wasn't.
That's what I would
a
say
lot of
ours was
people
too.
Didn't love it because it was hard to be invested in somebody who they felt was so kind of unmoored. And but for me, following
Yeah.
in the same way is what it's all about. Like,
Yeah.
it's like people watching to me. It's
Yes.
like, oh, what's going to happen next? What's she going to do?
Yeah,
What's she going to say?
yeah.
What's she going to think? So we all read for different reasons.
Yeah. His other book is called The Constellation of Vital Phenomena, which is completely different. It's one of the last wars that Russia had with Chechnya. So it's very much based in reality. I guess it's still historical, but it's none of these witticisms
Right.
and stuff like that. It's very
Right.
real, and it was excellent.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
A good author.
yeah. One to
Definitely
watch out
sounds like
for.
one if you like sort of those little historical tidbits tucked
Yeah.
into your
I
fiction.
think, and if people like, if Bridget used to love movies, books about movies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So somebody who likes that kind of
Yes.
stuff
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. I mean, I think that could be kind of fun present too, actually.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So yeah,
There you
Christmas.
go. Christmas presents all around.
Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
Hanukkah.
Stocking stuffers. All right. Well, I think that's about all we have time for. And so we'll say goodbye for now. We hope you'll join us again next month on BB Book Buzz. Goodbye.